Hello and welcome to Academic Transfer in Focus. My name is Galen Scott and I'm the Associate Vice President for Academic Transfer Programs. With me is Matthew Dowdy-Laurent. He is the Dean of Liberal Arts, Humanities, and Communications. Matthew and I are going to visit a little bit about the landscape of developmental education, particularly what we all fondly refer to as HB 2223, which was a bill passed by the 85th legislature here in Texas. So let's start with an overview of HB 2223. Sure. What do faculty and staff need to know about that legislation?
Well, the most important thing is that there are two core mandates that are phasing in as a result of this legislation. And they are, first of all, that we're going to ramp up co-recking courses so that we have developmental courses paired or co-recced with college credit courses, and that will affect the way the students are able to qualify for TSI. The second mandate changes the reimbursable maximum credit hours from 18 to 12 for developmental education. So if you think about it, those two things together really have had a significant impact on our INRW, our integrated reading and writing programs, and that came right on the heels of a big change in the cut score, which also had critical impact on our enrollments and so forth. Essentially, the state lowered the cut score so that more students are TSI complete than we had anticipated.
Okay. So for folks who don't know a lot about TSI and cut scores, I mean, can you just tell us what's the intent of TSI?
Sure. Fundamentally, the intent is to ensure that when students sign up for college courses, they're college ready in the skills, reading, writing, and mathematics skills. So the TSI is essentially an assessment test, and it's not very granular, but it does give us sort of an index of where students are functioning. And so the cut score, as we call it, is the score that one would have to make in order to be TSI complete in one of the areas. So when you lower the cut score, it means that more students are complete, right, because essentially they've passed the course.
Okay. So, what do you think informed the legislature's decision to impose this mandate for requiring co-recs and those sorts of things?
You know, that's a great question. Texas has adopted an initiative called the 60 by 30 Texas, which actually is a pretty interesting initiative. The idea behind 60 by 30 is by the year 2030, 60% of Texans will have a college level credential of some kind. And the idea behind this is that having a more educated, more skilled workforce is going to be a boost to the economy. So a lot of the context for this is essentially to get students through a program of study more quickly. Of course, the challenge is we don't want to do it just more quickly, because we could do that obviously by just awarding more degrees or more certificates. But what we want is to, in a sense, incentivize institutions helping students scaffold and acquire skills more quickly. And I have to say too, there's a political dimension to this, as is often the case. There's a recent movement, an accountability movement, and one facet of that movement is the argument is being made that people are essentially paying for the same education, the same skill set two times. Once at the local level, where you have the public education system, and then again when you have remediation education of some kind. So there's the way the wind is blowing right now is there's sort of a push to reduce the amount of money that we're spending on developmental. Now, of course, the challenge is it's at the very same time that we're also trying to increase the number of Texans who are having, who achieve some sort of college level certificate. So the challenge that places on us is we're going to have to do a better, faster job of helping students move through whatever remediation they may need in order to succeed in college credit courses.
And there's a lot of changes going on around the country. There's a state that no longer requires any student to take developmental education courses, whether or not they're deemed college ready. So
Right.
the landscape is really changing in a variety of ways. So are there benefits to this to students?
Well, actually, I think that there is a huge benefit in the case of at least the mandate for co-recking. The state really got it right. We've known for a long time that contextualized learning or contextualized skill acquisition is a very effective way of helping students progress. And it's mainly because there's a big boost in motivation. So let me use an example that's completely outside my own area. If you're a nursing student and you need to learn certain math skills that will allow you to, for instance, calculate the concentration of a solution, like a pharmaceutical solution. So you could take an algebra class where you learn the mathematical techniques in a sort of abstracted way, or you could learn those same mathematical skills in a pharmacology setting. And it's pretty clear that students who are in a contextualized setting acquire those skills, they master the skills more quickly, and they retain the skills, and then they also do better in what's called skill transfer, where you have one technique that you learn in one domain and then you transfer it to another. So we've known this is an effective way of boosting skill acquisition. And in fact, our own INRW department has a long history of pairing courses for that very reason. So in a sense, what the state has asked us to do is to do something that we already know is pretty effective. The challenge to us, though, is we want to, in the coming couple of years, not only do we have to meet the state targets for co-recking, but we also want to do some experimentation with a variety of different implementations of co-rect, or we're sort of calling them paired courses. Because what we want to find out is what pedagogical models are most effective. So the contextualizing is really good, but if you think about it, if we simply pair two courses and you've got a remediation-oriented course over here and you've got a Comp 1 or a history course over here, and they don't really integrate, then essentially all you've done is you've made an administrative connection between two courses. So what we want to find out is what degree of integration, what degree of sort of interpenetration of the course content or teaching techniques or assignments, all around, what pedagogical models are going to get the students through as quickly as possible. And one facet of that is computer-based instruction. So to what extent can we leverage computer-based instruction to help students master skills in specific domains? I'm sure you're familiar that we've had incredible success with ALEKS and CBI approaches in mathematics. And there are some analogies, there are also some really significant disanalogies. And we haven't had, for whatever reason, we haven't had as much development in the reading and writing skills domain in computer-based instruction, or at least not in such a comprehensive way. So we're looking at what's out there. We want to see what we can deploy in a series of pilots. And in 1 or 2 years' time, I think we'll begin to zero in on some pedagogical models that are most effective.
In the meantime, I know you're working to really sort of think through how we can pair these courses, right? How to support the history faculty member working with the INRW faculty member so that there is more synchronicity, so to speak.
Right.
So what sorts of things are you doing to support that?
Well, that's a great question. When this mandate sort of hit the streets, as it were, we rolled out a number of paired courses, and I think it's pretty fair to say we rolled those out very hastily, and we didn't have time to think through logistics or other sorts of things. And in some cases, obviously we made some mistakes, and a lot of the mistakes arose because we didn't have a planning process in place, and we didn't have adequate communication in place. So one of the first things that we've done is Sam, who's my counterpart in liberal arts, social and behavioral. We hosted a town meeting and we invited all of the professors who had taught paired courses in the last couple of semesters to hear from them what challenges and problems that hasty implementation caused. And what we want to do is take that information. It was great information. Again, a lot of it was a matter of communication problems and planning. And of course, facilities are an issue because these courses can't be just randomly distributed. They have to be connected in some way. So we gathered a lot of great information from the professors who are on the front lines of this project, and we'll be digesting that and putting together a planning and implementation process that's more orderly and thoughtful. And that, I think, will free professors to put the focus where their expertise is most needed, which is in creating pedagogical models, as I mentioned before, but also in determining which sorts of pairings optimize the student progression. So for instance, it may be that a pairing with Comp 1 is a very effective vehicle, but it may also be that history or psychology, some of the courses that are very popular, sort of, we could think of them as first semester courses, would be better choices. So that's an empirical question that we want to answer.
Okay. I know you also have ESOL in your dean area. Is ESOL affected by HB 2223?
In one sense, yes. ESOL, as you know, ESOL is considered, it depends on which document you look at. In certain ways, it's considered a developmental or remediation. In other ways, it has exemptions. But the larger picture here is, what I mentioned a moment ago is the state got it right with this emphasis on contextualization. That's my spin on it. And so one of the things that I've adopted is contextualization as a kind of division aspiration. So we're actually looking all across the range of our departments for opportunities to pair courses and to create the sort of contextualized learning opportunities. And so in that sense, ESOL will be part of this, because one of the things we would like to pilot is a paired course that's similar to the pairings that we have done before. I won't get into all the details, but we've done some fairly routine packages that we have called Comp 4.0, Comp 5.0. These are really good ways to organize the pairing, but we want to try this with the upper level ESOL students as well, because what we think is that in many ways the challenges are analogous. So if we have an upper level ESOL student who's also taking a college credit student, we will provide the scaffolding that will allow that person to succeed. Right. And the beauty of it is, at the end of that college credit course, the students who pass the course, achieve a level of mastery, are TSI complete. Right. But that's not the whole contextualization story. In other areas, we're finding ways to pair courses or take existing courses and contextualize them for particular programs. So we've got some really exciting and sort of maturing projects. For instance, one of the foreign language professors, Jan Imberson, has been teaching a Spanish sequence for healthcare professionals or for health sciences. And that's a wonderful opportunity for a student to get her or his language requirement, whatever that may be, for the aspiration they have. But it's also great because a lot of the vocabulary and role-playing opportunities will be centered on healthcare. And we're doing this in a number of disciplines, like philosophy, for instance, has a couple of new ethics courses rolling out that have a specific focus that a student who's majoring in something may find attractive. And we're even doing this in workforce areas. So for instance, we're about to roll out a logic course that is specifically geared for game design and programming students. So the whole idea is to find ways to help students with the motivation side of the equation, and one way to do that is to provide a context that the student is actually excited about, so that it doesn't feel quite so much like, okay, I have to go take this required course so I can check that box and do the next thing.
I have to apologize to those who are listening. INRW means Integrated Reading and Writing, and ESOL means English for Speakers of Other Languages. We live in a world of acronyms, so we sometimes default to those, and I apologize.
Yes, same here.
In general, the focus of all of our work is to support our strategic plan: access, persistence, and completion. So it sounds like that's really embedded in the mandate in HB 2223. We want students to persist and move forward. It's embedded in some of the co-rec work that we're doing. Any other thoughts on how HB 2223 informs our work or reflects larger higher ed landscape issues?
Well, let's start with the informs our work question. At the moment, most of the focus is on the co-recking because that's sort of the most apparent structural change that will need to be made. It's also a challenge because for institutions or programs that haven't really explored this very much or explored it only minimally, there's a requirement, there's a mandate to meet a certain percentage of courses. So that's gotten a whole lot of the attention recently. But I think in the long run, the reimbursement maximum is going to have tremendous impact, because what it means is we will have to focus much more on and much more efficiently on getting students through their remediation work so that they can be in college credit without costing the student more money. So I think that is a huge challenge for us, and it's going to require a lot of ingenuity to come up with mechanisms that don't sacrifice rigor, don't sacrifice the preparation, the skill preparation that students need, but that find ways to accelerate that process. So I think you're going to see a lot of experimentation, but I think it's going to be driven by that change from 18 to 12 reimbursable hours. In the long run, I think that's going to be very good for students because it's a challenge. It motivates us. I mean, the type of challenge it is going to motivate us to come up with ways that are able to help students get through. Because, I hate to sound like a philosopher, but it's my home discipline. So the challenge really is this: there really are only three solutions to the student success equation when you look at House Bill 2223 and its implications. And they are, we could put the burden on the public education system and tell them, prepare students for college. There are all kinds of problems about that, not least of which is funding and disparity of funding across different ISD, different contexts, different political units. So that's challenging. The other end of this sort of Scylla and Charybdis is we could become a selective admission institution, which is completely antithetical to what ACC stands for. So really the only course left open is to find a way to help more students move more quickly in less time than ever before. So, it's a huge challenge, but I think if we look at it that way, it can motivate us to really become more innovative. Now, the larger picture, I think you mentioned, this is not just an issue for Texas, but it's an issue all across the United States. The larger issue is there are a lot of questions about higher ed, including even questions about the value of a higher ed degree that we used to be able to take for granted. And I view those sorts of questions as an opportunity for us to articulate what it is about the work we do that provides some value added. And one of the things that I like to talk about with our faculty in liberal arts, humanities, and communications is almost any skill you want to know is available on your phone. So all you have to do is find a YouTube video and you can learn. I mean, it's amazing the array of things that are available. So the challenge for us is not providing students access to the skill acquisition. The challenge for us is articulating the value added proposition of spending that time with a professor or with that tutor or in that lab or whatever it is. So in one way, I think, yes, it's kind of scary landscape, and it can be very anxiety provoking, and it will prompt us to make changes. But it's also a very exciting time, because I think we can sort of, it sounds so poetic about it, but I think we can rediscover the soul of this vocation if we approach it the right way. So.
Okay. Thank you very much. There is more information on your screen about what's embedded in HB 2223. There's also some contact information if you want to visit with Matthew directly about some of the work that's going on in his world. So thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity.